we feel like we're combining the best of both a defensive set of portfolio metrics that allow us to play offense in potentially more challenging times to come.
I'm here today with Czarnecki, CEO of Broadstone Net Lease. Broadstone reported a strong start to 2022 with a solid Q1 operating results. Can you talk about some of your recent firsts, including the largest first quarter of acquisition volume and your strongest start to a year?
Absolutely. I'd actually think I'd take a step back, and the $210 million of acquisitions we announced in Q1 was very much the result of work we did all through last year on some of those firsts. And a lot of the reasons we went public at the end of 2020 was to gain broader access to the capital markets and all the tools that affords us, especially as a growing net lease company. So when we entered 2021, we were eager to put those to work, and the first sort of compounded upon each other in a very good way. We added a second investment grade rating, which was very helpful in the early part of the year in January, then did our first follow-on equity offering in June of 2021, followed by our first inaugural bond issuance in September of the year, and then also getting our ATM program up and running. And all of that helped generate the capital necessary for us to be thinking about a bigger start to acquisitions for 2022. And so the solid first quarter that we put together, the largest in our history, really began all throughout the year, but then really took shape a lot more in the fourth quarter of last year as we continued to build that pipeline, begin to execute, and set ourselves on footing for what we think can be a very strong year for us in 2022.
Broadstone manages primarily single-tenant CRE across property types, including industrial, healthcare, restaurants, retail, and office. How has the Reits approach differed per sector throughout the pandemic, considering that each sector has varied in performance?
They very much do have different performance, and there's a number of attributes in each one of them that have caused them to be managed differently. So with industrial, virtually all of our tenants continued to hum along during the pandemic with almost no interruption. Those were all considered mission-critical facilities, working across a host of manufacturing and food processing and other facilities that were just key to infrastructure that never closed in any particular way. I'd say in the healthcare, we also experienced generally the same dynamic. In the beginning, early stages of the pandemic, there was obviously some slowdown in elective surgeries and procedures and things like that, but I would say within, generally 3 months, most folks had worked their way through that and were pretty close to normal operations and in their healthcare aspects. The longer run look towards restaurants was obviously a slower recovery for one half of our portfolio. Tenant collections and all of that remained very strong, but we saw a business model with the casual dining space that was working to normalize their operations and think about how they were going to work through the pandemic. So you saw dining rooms closed for a period of time, more heavily reliance on takeout and things like that. That has subsequently normalized, and we've been more comfortable committing capital to the casual dining space, which we did in Q4 and Q1 of this year. And so that's been a model that, through a lot of ingenuity and thoughts on how menus are structured, dining room rationalization, and having slightly less tables, they've been able to work through that situation very well. QSR actually had a buffer or a banner year in how well they performed during the pandemic, and while sales have normalized a little bit, performance has been exceptionally strong in that front as well. And then on the office space, we've been continued to be paused on office acquisitions. Our portfolio has a good, strong remaining lease term of 6+ years and very strong tenancy there. And so we've been really actively engaging with tenants more on what their long-term utilization plans are. And with just 15 assets, it's a relatively small part of our portfolio. So our view is that we can take a very patient and methodical approach towards asset management and sort of think about each one of those situations as a bespoke matter and address each one as they come through over the coming years. So it was a very diverse approach, but ultimately it really rolled up to still exceptionally strong performance, with 2/3 of our portfolio being centered in that industrial and healthcare space.
Economists are currently looking at rising inflation and the potential for a recession. How is Broadstone addressing these concerns with investors this week?
I think one of the things we've been really trying to stress for folks is that we feel we're very much built for a choppy environment. And I think that, again, goes back to what we demonstrated during the pandemic with having nearly best-in-class portfolio performance. And so as people have concerns about inflation and tenancy and things like that that might impact the economy later on in the year, we've been really trying to stress and highlight how resilient our portfolio is, how defensive it is. And through that defense, we also actually see an offensive nature to it because we have such a strong base to work from. As dynamics change amongst our different property types, we feel like there's an opportunity for us to continue to be a solid growth story for investors because of that defensive backdrop to our cash flows. And I think we've seen people begin to rotate positions into more defensive-oriented names with the uncertainty that we see in the market right now.